Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at the R&B pioneer Angie Stone.
Yeah.
She died in a car crash back in March 2025, a real tragedy that made headlines.
Yeah, but the facts that came out maybe 6 months later, they paint a completely different and honestly quite shocking picture.
Exactly. So this deep dive is really about two things happening at once, two big tragedies.
Mhm.
First, her decades-long fight for what she said was millions in unpaid royalties.
And second, the terrifying, really brief moments that define how she actually died on that highway. It's a lot to unpack.
It really is. Our mission today is to take all these sources. We've got legal documents, financial stuff, and that really emotional video she posted, and just, break down what you need to know about this whole complicated situation.
Because the initial reports, they made it sound like a straightforward, instantaneous, unavoidable accident. But the lawsuit her kids filed, it shows she actually survived the first wreck.
Survived it.
Yeah, survived it, was conscious, apparently trying to escape the vehicle, and only then was killed by a second catastrophic collision.
Wow. Okay, so that's where it shifts, right? From just a tragic accident to questions about, about systemic failure, potentially.
Definitely.
We're looking at an artist who was basically fighting the industry right up until the very end. So let's start there, with her public call for financial justice. Because the amount of money involved, the alleged exploitation, it's huge.
It is. I mean, Angie Stone, born Angela Verne Brown, she was fundamental. Lead singer of The Sequence, a pioneering group in R&B and early hip-hop.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then her solo career, huge hits like Wish I Didn't Miss You.
Yeah.
4 Grammy nominations across, 4 decades? By any measure, she should have been set, financially secure, maybe even retired 20 years ago, like she said.
And yet, just 3 months before she died, December 2024,
Hmm.
she posts this incredibly powerful live video on social media. It really feels like a declaration of war now, looking back. What exactly did she say? Who did she target?
She went right after Universal Music Group. Directly. She was really specific, too, saying they were, quote, receiving all my royalties, all my mechanicals, said they'd, quote, taken pretty much everything from her.
Wow.
The weight of that video, here's this legend basically having to plead online for money she felt was rightfully hers. It's tough to watch. She sounds so tired, but also defiant.
Let's dig into those mechanicals and royalties, because this is where the music industry gets so complicated, and maybe how that complexity can be used against artists. Our sources really detail how the money seems to just vanish. If she sold millions, where did it all go?
Well, it disappears through this, maze of deductions that are baked right into standard contracts. Even if she had a pretty decent royalty rate, say 15%, which is probably generous,
Okay.
that gross number gets slashed immediately.
Oh, give us an example of how that actually works.
Okay, so first, you've got deductions for things like packaging. Even now, with digital music, labels often still charge artists for physical CD packaging costs from years ago.
Seriously?
No.
Still?
Yeah. Then you tack on producer points, distribution fees, marketing costs, and the really big one, reserves for returns. These reserves are notorious in the industry.
Explain that for us. Reserves for returns, why notorious?
Okay, so the label holds back a big chunk of the artist's money, sometimes like 35%, saying they need it just in case stores return unsold CDs or vinyl.
But does that even happen much anymore with modern distribution?
Not nearly as much, and even if the returns don't happen, the label often just sits on that money, sometimes for years, earning interest on it. It's basically like the artist is forced to give the label a huge zero-interest loan from their own earnings.
Wow.
Our sources figure that even before you factor in recouping the money spent making and marketing the album, Stone's estimated gross royalties, maybe $4.5 million on album sales, could have been cut by over 60% just through these kinds of deductions.
So the label controlled the cash flow, using the artist's own money against them before the artist even sees a dime of profit. That's nuts.
It's incredibly tough, and that financial maze is hard enough. But where things get really murky and where the biggest potential payouts were probably missed is sampling.
Right. This was a huge part of her claim, wasn't it?
Absolutely. This is the core of her intellectual property argument. She claimed Universal failed to properly register her songs for publishing royalties. So when her early stuff with The Sequence got sampled by huge modern artists,
Like Bruno Mars.
exactly like Bruno Mars, his massive hit, Uptown Funk, it sampled Funk You Up, a key track from The Sequence.
Yeah.
Now, Uptown Funk generated estimates say somewhere between $50 million and $75 million in total revenue worldwide. Massive song.
Unbelievable numbers.
If Stone's writing credits were properly registered and accounted for, she should have gotten a significant slice of the publishing money from that. We're talking like $1.6 million to maybe $2.4 million just from that one song.
Just one song.
Yeah. And the alleged failure to register properly, it just obscures who owns what. It makes it way harder for the original creator, like Stone, to track down and claim their fair share when their work gets used later, especially in these huge global hits.
So if we try to pull all these threads together, the heavy deductions, the lost mechanicals, the sampling revenue, even using conservative numbers, what was the total amount she was fighting for back in December?
Conservatively, the sources calculate her lifetime earnings should have netted her around $6.8 million minimum.
What?
But when you start factoring in the potential for global use, sync licenses for movies or ads, and especially that sampling income, a really thorough accounting could easily push her deserved earnings into the $10 to $15 million range, maybe even more.
So her claims weren't just emotional. They were based on actual industry practices and potential earnings.
Absolutely. They seem mathematically grounded in how this kind of standard industry, well, exploitation can work.
Okay, so she's got this enormous legal and financial fight brewing. She's publicly calling out one of the biggest players in entertainment. And then, just 3 months later, tragedy strikes. Let's pivot now to the timeline of her death, because as you said, it was initially reported very differently.
Yeah, when the news first broke in March 2025, the media reports were pretty consistent. Fatal car accident near Montgomery, Alabama, happened in the pre-dawn hours on I-85. Instantaneous death. A terrible story, but it seemed like, a closed case.
But that whole narrative just crumbled when her children filed their lawsuit in September. What did that legal filing actually reveal about how things happened?
It revealed this terrifying, multi-stage event. So the vehicle she was in, it was a Mercedes-Benz Sprinter van carrying her, and 8 other people lost control and flipped over. That was crash 1.
Okay, the initial crash. And the crucial detail that completely changes things.
The crucial detail is that Angie Stone and all 8 other people in that van survived that initial crash.
All 9 survived.
All 9 survived the flip. They were hurt, probably disoriented, but alive. Reports say passersby even stopped to help. People were able to crawl out. The lawsuit is very specific. Is that Stone was conscious and was actively trying to get out of the overturned van.
So she survived the first impact. She was trying to rescue herself.
Exactly. She'd survived the initial violence. She was in the process of getting herself to safety.
And what happened next is just devastating.
Yeah. While she was struggling to free herself, a huge 18-wheeler truck slammed into the van that was already crashed and disabled on the highway. That was crash 2.
Oh my God.
And it was the second collision that ejected Stone from the van, pinned her underneath. That was the fatal event. She wasn't killed by the crash that started it all, but by the one that happened afterwards.
That realization
Yeah.
that she lived through the first part, was trying to escape maybe seconds from being clear, and then a completely separate vehicle kills her.
Yeah.
That forces you to look beyond just driver error, right? It points towards bigger systemic failures.
Precisely. The lawsuit does allege negligence against both drivers, the van driver for the first crash and the truck driver for, not seeing or avoiding the wreck. But significantly, the lawsuit also faults the truck manufacturer.
How so?
It alleges a major technical failure. It claims the 18-wheeler's collision mitigation system failed to function properly.
Collision mitigation system.
Yeah.
For people who aren't familiar, what is that and why is it significant that it allegedly failed?
Okay, this is really critical. Modern big rigs rely heavily on this tech. It uses radar sensors to detect stuff ahead, like a crashed van blocking the road. It's specifically designed to alert the driver and even automatically hit the brakes if the driver doesn't react fast enough. It's meant to prevent exactly this kind of secondary crash.
So let me get this straight. The lawsuit is basically saying that for Angie Stone to die the way she did, you needed this perfect storm.
Mm-hmm.
The van crashes first. Then the truck driver somehow doesn't see it or react in time. And the expensive safety technology built into the truck, the tech designed specifically to stop this from happening, also fails at the exact same moment.
That's the convergence of failures the family's lawsuit is arguing. It throws up serious questions, not just about the truck's tech, but about truck safety standards overall and highway safety protocols, too.
Like what kind of protocols?
Well, how long was it between the first crash and the second one? Were emergency services called? Were they on their way? Maybe slowed down because it was so early in the morning? Could anyone, have put out flares or set up some kind of warning zone to prevent that truck from hitting the van? It wasn't just one thing going wrong. It seems like a cascade of failures, all coming together right when she was most vulnerable.
Okay, let's try and connect these two big threads now.
Yeah.
You've got the financial fight, the alleged exploitation, and then these incredibly specific, tragic circumstances of her death.
Hmm.
Which brings us to maybe the most jarring fact about the crash itself, the statistical side of it.
It's extremely hard to ignore. Angie Stone was the only person who died out of the 9 people in that van.
The only one.
The only one. 8 other people survived, including apparently another passenger who was also trying to get out when the second crash happened. The specific sequence of events needed for her death, surviving the flip, trying to escape, being in that exact spot when the truck hit, it feels extraordinarily unlucky, at the very least.
And we absolutely have to stress here, the sources we have show no public evidence suggesting foul play. None.
Correct. No evidence of that has been presented publicly.
However, given the context, the millions in royalties she was very publicly fighting for, the timing of her death, just 3 months after that final forceful accusation, these circumstances, they demand the absolute highest level of scrutiny and investigation.
And that need for scrutiny gets amplified when you look at what happened financially right after she died, because the very corporation she was accusing of withholding money immediately started benefiting from her death.
That's right, the data is pretty stark. In the week after she passed, streams of her music catalog shot up dramatically, like 1,300%. Sales jumped 10,000%.
Yeah, and that sudden surge in revenue just highlights the power imbalance, doesn't it? That money flows to her estate now, yes, which is good. But it also flows, critically, back to the label she was accusing of theft just weeks before.
Which explains why you saw people like Tyler Perry speaking out so strongly, right?
Yeah.
He publicly asked, essentially, all those years, all those songs, all that money she was owed, where is it?
Exactly. He amplified that question.
So this case, it's really become a focal point for 2 massive systemic issues now. The need for reform in the music industry and accountability in highway and vehicle safety. Her family is basically fighting a war on 2 fronts.
They really are. Right now, they're in court battling the trucking company, the truck manufacturer, trying to establish liability for her death. And that crash lawsuit, it's incredibly important for another reason.
Why is that?
Because any money they might win from that lawsuit will likely be crucial to fund the second legal battle, the much more complicated, probably much more expensive fight against Universal Music Group to try and reclaim that intellectual property debt, the $10 or $15 million she felt she was owed.
Wow. So they have to fight for accountability in her death just to get the resources to fight for the justice she was seeking in her life.
It seems that way. They're intertwined. It's an incredibly heavy burden for them to carry, dealing with the personal tragedy and taking on an industry giant at the same time.
So Angie Stone's life ended with these 2 huge unresolved fights. The financial one against the label, and now her family's legal battle to understand and get accountability for those final harrowing moments on the highway.
And her courage, speaking out like she did that December, that's the thread that runs through all of this. She knew there was a risk. In that video itself, she actually said she was concerned about the consequences of speaking out against the industry.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to think about. Regardless of whether her death was truly just a tragic freak accident or something else, consider the chilling effect. Think about the impact this sequence of events, a public, fiery accusation against a powerful company, followed just 3 months later by her death under these extremely unusual circumstances. What effect will that have on other legacy artists, maybe exploited artists, who are thinking about speaking their own truth?
Her final act was one of defiance. And that defiance, it really demands that we keep asking the question she asked. Where is the money that was owed to her? The industry should feel compelled to answer that, even though she's tragically no longer here to demand it herself.